So, welcome to this webinar about creating writing routines without the stress, shame, and guilt. So, here's what we're going to be discussing. We're going to talk about what starting a routine with ADHD looks like, 4 things I think you're doing wrong right now, 3 ways to upgrade your routine for your ADHD brain, the magic ingredient, and if you stay to the end, I will give you some bonus gifts. And after that, I will go into a Q&A where you can ask me more questions, and I will try to answer both those and the questions that you may have shared in the Q&A only section that I haven't yet addressed. So let's start here. What starting a writing routine looks like with ADHD. This is some of the stories that people shared with me when I was preparing for this webinar. Someone said, most routines I establish don't make it past a week and tend to leave me feeling like a failure. Someone else said, my biggest challenge is other stuff eating into the writing time I've set aside as a routine. And there was a third, my issue is not so much getting words on the page as focusing those words to create actual scenes that move the plot forward instead of going off on random tangents. Now, which one do you struggle with the most? I'm going to do another poll where you can choose between consistency, prioritization, going off on tangent, or none of these. What is it that you struggle with most? Going off on tangents, I see consistency, prioritization. Oh, consistency, just 1. That's great, because those are definitely topics that we're going to be discussing during this webinar. So I've been an ADHD writing coach for 4 years now. And during that time, I talked to a lot of ADHD writers about their challenges and their struggles. And of course, I had a lot of ideas myself for books that I could be writing, but I never really actually started writing a book. That changed in February when I finally decided that maybe it was time for me to stop teaching and actually start practicing as well. Okay, I never stopped teaching, but start practicing as well. And that is when I started writing my own book called Writing Traps, the ADHD Writer's Map to a Finished Book. Now, I decided in February what the title was going to be. I outlined the book, and from the moment I had outlined the book, I wrote almost every single day until I finished the manuscript 2 months later. And the reason why I could establish such a successful writing routine that lasted exactly as long as it was supposed to last is that I had learned from all these experiences that my ADHD writing clients had shared with me. And I had learned from these experiences so much that I actually knew what traps to look out for and not to fall into. And that is what I'm going to do for you as well during this webinar today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some insights about how ADHD can make it harder to create a sustainable writing routine. And I'm going to give you the tips, tools, and strategies that I used and that you can now use to create a writing routine of your own. But I'm a little bit nervous. This is my first webinar, so be patient and be kind. Now, I think that the number one problem is that you have been telling yourself that you are incapable of starting a perfect writing routine. But I don't think this is true. I think that when you say this to yourself, you emphasize the you. You are incapable of starting a perfect writing routine. But I would like you to make a mindset shift here. Instead, I think you are incapable of starting a perfect writing routine. Now, this is liberating because the problem is no longer you. You haven't done anything wrong. The only thing that you really have done wrong is thinking that you should create a writing routine that is not only perfect, that allows you to have the output that you think you should have, but that you can also stick with for the rest of your life. We're going to talk about this a lot, but if you tell yourself that you're going to have to stick to this writing routine for the rest of your life, then you're already setting yourself up for failure, and you're setting yourself up for a whole lot of shame, guilt, and disappointment. So the first thing I really want to tell you, and I want you to grab a sticky note and write this down because it's important, you can't fail your tools. A writing routine is a tool to help you show up for your writing practice. The writing routine is a tool that is supposed to support your practice. If it is a tool, you can't fail it. So if you stop showing up for your writing practice, your writing routine doesn't care. So you can stop feeling so shameful and so guilty. The problem is not that you can't stick with it. If you can't stick with it anymore, then you have to make changes to the writing routine itself. You aren't the problem, the writing routine is. So that is the foundation from which we'll be working today. I want you to keep this in mind, but with this foundation in place, let's move on to the real question: how to build a writing routine. So first, we're going to talk about 4 things you're doing wrong when you're building a writing practice. Now, of course, there's a lot of people here, which means that I'm not entirely sure that you are doing these wrong, but I have worked with a lot of ADHD writers, and I have never really met anyone who isn't doing this before they start working with me. So the first thing you're probably doing wrong is that you believe in the fiction of needing a whole day to write. Now, the reason why this is a fiction is that us ADHD writers have an affected sense of time. And that means that we are not very good at managing whole large time chunks, such as a day. When you have a whole day to write, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to be procrastinating for most of the day. And at the end of the day, you're going to have your most productive hours. I've actually noticed that a lot of my clients who write full time are a lot less productive than the people who write in addition to a full-time job. Because the people who write in addition to a full-time job really try to make the most of that half to 1 hour that they have every day. And that is how I wrote my book. I didn't stop my coaching sessions. What I did was I created 30 to 60 minutes time slots every single day in which I wrote. And that was plenty of time to write my book. Now, believing in the fiction of needing a whole day to write, what can that look like? It can look like I will start a writing practice when I have a whole day to write, or I will make progress on my book when I have a whole day to write. Or, and this is my favorite, I have taken a week off a month from now, and during that time, I'm going to make so much progress that I don't have to start writing now. Now, it's that last part that's the most important, because not only is needing a whole day to write a fiction, it's actually keeping you from writing now. So I don't want you to create a perfect writing routine. I don't want you to wait until the stars align. You have a perfect day, a whole day to write, in which you also happen to feel good and don't get distracted by any phone calls or anything else going on. I want you to just get started. And that takes us to the second thing that you've probably been doing wrong. And that is starting too big. If I would have told myself in February that I would have had to stick with my writing routine for the rest of my life, I probably wouldn't have started. Because if it is too big, needing to stick with this for the rest of my life, it is going to be so scary that I'm going to procrastinate. When things are too big, we procrastinate. Now, I don't know if you've read the book Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg, but I really recommend it. And BJ Fogg has this model he calls B is MAP. He says a behavior happens when 3 factors are in place, when there's motivation, ability, and prompt. Now, let's start with the prompts first. The prompt is just a reminder to do the behavior. Now, just because there is a prompt, however, doesn't mean you're going to do the behavior. You've probably ignored plenty of notifications on your phone to know that a prompt alone is not enough. So he says a prompt only works when your ability compensates for your lack of motivation. So he says you don't need to have high motivation every single day. But on those days when your motivation is low, you're only going to do the behavior if the task is super easy to do. And making it small is a way to make it easy to do. So here are 3 practical ways that you can use to start small. One is to choose short time spans for writing every day. Instead of saying I have to write a whole day, say I am going to write for 10 to 30 minutes today. And after those 10 to 30 minutes, I'm going to reevaluate. Because sitting down for an entire day can feel incredibly overwhelming. So you need a whole bunch of motivation because it seems so hard to do. But 10 to 30 minutes, that you're probably absolutely capable of, which means you don't need a whole bunch of motivation to get yourself to do the thing. Now, the second is to set yourself a small output goal, for example, 100 words. You make it small. You say, I only have to do 100 words. Usually after those 100 words, you're motivated enough, you're in the flow enough that you can keep going. And the third relates back to thinking that you need a whole day to write or sticking with your writing routine for the rest of your life. Seeing your writing routine as an experiment for now. It doesn't have to be unchangeable. It doesn't have to last for the rest of your life. You can just experiment. And that can be really liberating because you open yourself up to practice, to try, and not commit. And if you don't commit, it's easier. And therefore you need less motivation. Now, a couple of years ago, I started working with someone who had an anxiety disorder. And that anxiety disorder for her expressed itself in such a way that she got very anxious every time she had to start a task. And she told me about something that she created, which was the 10-minute rule. So whenever she felt anxious about starting a task, she would tell herself, I only have to do this for 10 minutes. She would get started, tell herself, after these 10 minutes, I can stop if I want. She would get started, and after 10 minutes, usually, she would be in the flow and wouldn't want to stop anymore. Now, for her, this worked very, very well, but over the years, I have recommended this to a lot of my clients as well, especially those without anxiety. You don't have to have an anxiety disorder for this to work. This works really well when you have trouble with initiating tasks. And that is something that a lot of ADHD writers struggle with. A lot of ADHDers struggle with. Now, the 10-minute rule is a prime example of starting small. Starting small does not mean that you can't write for longer than 10 minutes. It means that you only commit to writing for 10 minutes. So I want you to write this down because this is important. You need to start small if you want to start anything. There's a third thing that I think you're doing wrong, and that is not making a plan for your writing session. If you don't choose a time and place to write in advance, you're going to be a lot more likely to not write at all. The first thing you should do is think about what time of day is best for you to write. And you might already know. Maybe you can let us know in the poll whether you prefer to write in the morning, afternoon, or the evenings. Oh, I see an overwhelming morning answer here. That's great. Now, if you don't know yet what your ideal writing time, no, things are changing. If you don't know yet what your ideal writing time is, that is absolutely fine. You can experiment and find out. For example, tomorrow you can write in the morning. The day after in the afternoon, and the day after that, you can write in the evening. Then you can come back and reflect on which experience was best for you. Ideal writing time. I see 61% morning. So we're still pretty solid there. Good. So there are 3 steps to choosing your writing time. The first, you've probably already done. Find out what time of day is best for you. The majority of you have chosen the morning. If you don't know yet, you can experiment. The second step is to find a pre-established habit at that time of day. Now, I hear you thinking, Susanna, I don't have any pre-established habits. And I think that is untrue, especially for you morning people. I am pretty sure that every morning you wake up, and at some point you leave the bed, you might go to the bathroom, maybe make yourself a coffee or a tea. And those are all things that you do every single morning. These are pre-established habits. If you are an afternoon writer, which is 23% of us, you might have a second cup of coffee. You might have lunch. There are things that you do every afternoon. In the evening, you probably have dinner. Maybe you clean up the kitchen a little bit. All of those are pre-established habits. Now, when you have found that pre-established habit, what you want to do is what they call habit stacking. So you want to connect the new writing habit to the pre-established habit that you're already doing. Now, over time, this pre-established habit is going to become the prompt, the reminder for you to engage in your writing practice. But Before that is the case, you're probably going to have to remind yourself, give yourself extra prompts to establish this connection between the old habit and the new one. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about this pre-established habit that you want to immediately proceed your writing practice. And this can be getting to your desk first thing in the morning. This can be journaling, whatever it is that you do, figure out where it ends. What is the exact last thing you do? For example, you can go to the bathroom and you can finish brushing your teeth, and that is the moment that you're supposed to be starting to write. Now, when you know what that location is, you can give yourself a prompt there. You can grab your sticky notes, put a prompt there that it's time for you to start writing. You can put a reminder on your coffee mug, on your bathroom mirror, on your computer screen, whatever location your pre-established habit ends at, that is the perfect location for this reminder. Now, you're going to become blind to this sticky note in about a week or so, but by that time, you should have already established this connection between the pre-established habit and the new writing habit. Now, I said not choosing a time and place to write, but about the place, I'm going to be pretty short. You don't have to write at the same place every day. What you do need is a plan in advance. I kind of skipped over this. So the reason why you need a plan in advance is that a plan can be the difference between doing it and not doing it. If you tell yourself, I need to write today, but you don't tell yourself exactly when you're going to be writing today, you're going to have a lot of decision moments throughout the day. Am I going to do it now, or am I going to do something else? We are not very good at making decisions. And if making a decision is already hard and it's going to result in something even harder, such as writing, then there's going to be a pretty good chance that you're not going to make that choice. You're going to keep choosing not to write until the day is gone and you feel guilty and you feel shame because you still haven't written. Now, when you have a plan for exactly when and where you're going to write, you take all of that decision making out of the process. You've already made the decision for you. Now, you can still make the decision not to follow the plan, but that is only one decision. And because it is hard to make, you're less likely to make it. So you actually increase the chances that you're going to be writing if you make your plan in advance. Now, what I was about to say was you don't have to write in the same place every day. You can change your plan as long as you have one. So you can say, for example, this week I'm going to be writing at my kitchen table, but next week I'm going to be writing in a coffee shop. That's absolutely fine. You don't have to write at the same place every time, as long as you have decided in advance where you're going to be writing. Because when it comes to the place to write, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to be procrastinating on that decision a lot, because once you've made the decision, you're going to have to write. So it's a lot easier to keep pondering over the perfect place to write until your writing slot has evaporated and you no longer have any time to write today. Now, the fourth thing that you might be doing wrong when you're building a writing practice is to deny yourself joy. And I have seen this with so many of the clients that I have worked with. Now, we all grew up in a society where it was believed that to motivate a kid to do something, you have to give them discipline, you have to be strict with them, you have to stress the importance, and you have to make it very, very serious. And that is something that we have all internalized. When we feel that we have to do something hard, we usually try to motivate ourselves with discipline. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to one of my clients and I asked her how the writing was going, because that's my job. She told me, actually, after writing every day for months, I have stopped writing. So I did a little bit of digging. I asked her some questions. Turned out that the habit that she had stacked her writing habit on top of was journaling. She got up every day at 6 a.m. She would get out of bed, make herself a cup of coffee, and then in her pajamas, do some journaling before she started writing. Now, a couple of weeks ago, something changed. And the thing that changed is she was in the UK and the morning started to get really dark. So she was used to getting up at 6 a.m. to the early morning light. But now when she woke up at 6 a.m., there was no light. It was completely dark. And when it is completely dark, she wanted to just curl up in bed, snuggle some more, and stay in bed for as long as she could. And when she got out of bed, there was no time for journaling. So she skipped the journaling and she went straight to work without working on her book first. So she said, what I need to do is I need to be more disciplined and I need to be strict with myself and I need to get myself out of bed at 6 a.m. And I said, what if we do it a little bit differently? What if instead of using discipline and your strict mommy voice, what if instead we try to use joy and excitement as a source of motivation here? So we sparred, we talked a little bit back and forth. And what I said was, when it's dark outside, isn't there something we can do with that? Isn't there a way that we can make it being dark outside actually exciting? And she said, actually, I have candles lying around. So I actually think that the idea of journaling by candlelight in the morning is incredibly magical. And that's what she started to do. She started to get up at 6 a.m. She got out of bed on excitement alone, and she started journaling by candlelight. And that journaling led to her writing. I asked her a couple of days ago how things were going, and she said, well, I no longer journal by candlelight, but that's no longer necessary because I have gotten back into the habit of getting up at 6 a.m. even when it's dark because of this joyful habit. So, like I said, the moral of the story is try to motivate yourself less with discipline. You don't always have to be strict with yourself. Sometimes you can just use joy and excitement as a way more productive source of motivation. So 3 ways to upgrade your routine for your ADHD brain. Don't forget that this chat is mostly to share ideas with each other, but there's also a Q&A tab where you can ask questions that you want me to answer. That way I don't have to scroll through all the chat to find the questions that I need to respond to. So we talked about let's go back. We talked about the 4 things you're doing wrong when you're creating a writing practice. Now, these 4 things you're doing wrong, I hope have resulted in some ideas about how you can fix these mistakes. 3 ways to upgrade your routine for your ADHD brain. The first is to bookend your writing session. Now, I've been talking about writing routine and writing habit interchangeably so far, but of course there is a difference. And the difference is that a routine is a collection of habits. Now, there's a reason why I called this webinar writing routines and not writing habits. And that is because I think that seeing a writing session as one block where you should be doing one thing is actually a problem. We, people with ADHD, have a hard time switching tasks. We have a hard time just dropping one thing and jumping into the next. But we still expect ourselves every time we sit down to write to just easily, smoothly get into the writing process. We expect that we're going to be sitting down and immediately write the perfect sentence. And when that doesn't happen, we feel disappointed with ourselves, we feel shame, we feel guilt, and we feel stress. So what I want you to do is I want you to upgrade your routine for your ADHD brain by bookending your writing sessions. First, I want you to create a starting habit. I want you to start doing something before you get into your writing session. Now, one of my clients uses tangential tasks. He calls this ramp up time, and he will clean up his notes or his citations. He's an academic writer. And for him, that is a way to engage with his writing project without actually expecting himself to write a perfect sentence straight away. So he will ease into engaging with his writing project. Another client I work with really loves to start his writing sessions by reading other people's work. And he especially likes that because he sees everything that is wrong with the thing that he is reading. And because he disagrees with it so strongly, he will be motivated to start writing himself because he will write against them. So for him, reading other people's work is a way to ease into thinking through his project. And then, of course, there are my many clients who love journaling before they start writing. And the reason why they love journaling before they start writing is that is a way to get into the writing flow without actually having to write the project itself. So these are 3 examples of starting habits, and each of these 3 examples targets a different thing that you might need to get into the writing flow. The first is getting familiar with your project again. The second is starting to think about the topic of your project again. And the third is getting into the writing flow. So these are 3 examples of starting habits. And by introducing these starting habits, you're no longer task switching, you're task transitioning. We are bad at task switching. We are absolutely capable of task transitioning as ADHD writers. So what is it? I see some of you already responded to this question. What is it that you do to get in the writing zone? Maybe it's a good idea to give each other ideas in the chat. Christara says, reading my own work helps because it reminds me of what the hell I was doing last time. Ashley says, journaling clears out the cobwebs for her. It's very interesting. Correct journals and tidies up notes to get up to speed with where you left off. That's great. Peter, lots of caffeine and a favorite pen. We'll talk a little bit about objects later. Oh, I think we're going to talk about objects next. No. First, I said bookend, and bookending means something before, something after. Oh, Deborah, the right pen is essential. 2 things you can do after each writing session. I think after the writing session is actually the perfect moment to set yourself up for success later. Now, often when you stop writing, you will just walk away from your writing project and go do something else. You're, again, switching tasks. But I would like you to think a little bit about what you can do after your writing session to make sure that the next time it's going to be easier to start. Now, I know a lot of you, because you're here, are struggling with consistent writing routines, which means that you might write for a few days in a row and then step away from your project and the project kind of disappears off the radar for a couple of weeks, right? That is all good and well, but one of the reasons why it is so hard to get back to your writing project after you've fallen out of your routine is that it's going to take you a lot of time to figure out what to do next. And that is also true if you only wrote yesterday. We ADHD writers often have a lot of trouble with our memories, so you can't really expect yourself to remember tomorrow where you left off and what the next task to do is. So what you can do is you can use the minute after your writing session to leave yourself what I call a stitch mark. And this is a story for another time. It has to do with knitting hats. But what you can do is you can leave yourself instructions for what to do when you next come back to your writing project. Another thing that you can do is add your success to your list of achievements. I always tell people you're never going to feel like you've achieved anything if you don't acknowledge your achievements, right? We have achievements all the time, but we forget about them straight away. So if you write down the fact that you showed up for your writing session as an achievement, you're going to feel a lot more positive about your progress. This is a way to develop a more positive relationship with your work. And it might also give your inner cheerleader a little bit of ammunition the next time she gets in a fight with your inner critic. Because when your inner critic tells you that you never do anything and you don't get anything right, your inner cheerleader can take out this list of achievements and say, well, you're absolutely wrong. Here's the proof. So these are 2 things that you can do after each writing session to set yourself up for success later. Now, there's a second way in which you can upgrade a routine for your ADHD brain, and that is with goal setting. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with dopamine, but dopamine is, Ashley is Sadia's inner cheerleader. That's lovely. Dopamine is the brain's reward and motivation system. And dopamine is a chemical that is released when you anticipate an achievement, and it's released when you achieve that achievement. Now, depending on what researcher you ask, ADHD brains have different problems with dopamine, and that is the cause of many of our issues with motivation, our issues with time blindness, etc. So what we can do is we can use goal setting to actually hack the dopamine system. If you say that your goal is to write an entire book or an entire screenplay or an entire TV pilot, then you are creating such a big goal for yourself that you don't really anticipate that you're going to succeed, you're going to achieve that goal today. And therefore, you're not going to have the dopamine boost you need to be motivated to work on it. Now, if you make your goal smaller, then you can have an anticipation of achieving this goal, which is going to give you a dopamine boost. And then maybe an hour later, you will achieve the goal, which gives you another dopamine boost. These dopamine boosts are going to make you feel motivated and feel rewarded. So this is a way to create a more positive relationship with your work. And if you join my Tuesday writers' rooms, my co-working sessions, you'll already know that every hour I ask you to set a goal for the next hour and to make it concrete. And after that hour, I check back in with you to ask if you achieved this goal. Now, this is by design because that is a way to hack the dopamine system. Set yourself a very concrete goal for the next 30 minutes or the next 60 minutes. And then try to achieve that goal. You're going to increase your dopamine, your motivation, and you're going to increase your sense of reward when you finally achieve this task. So grab a sticky note and think about a goal that you can set for yourself the next time you sit down to write. And as so many of you are in the Americas, you might actually be able to write something down for today. Sadia does join my writer's room. She says that good job from Susanna after the hour is a dopamine hit. Good. That's how it was designed. Christara says dopamine is the name of my Animal Crossing island. So we talked about dopamine. So that easily brings us to my favorite topic, which is progress tracking. So remember how we talked about this inner cheerleader and you having to give her ammunition the next time she gets into a fight with your inner critic? Well, progress tracking is something that can help. And it is also something that can be incredibly rewarding. There are different ways in which you can track your progress. There's graphs, tables, and color-in trackers. These are graphs. These are habit trackers or word count trackers. There's a lot of savings trackers online where you have a savings jar that you can color in or bee-themed ones. And I often use these savings trackers for my clients as word count trackers. It can be incredibly motivating to just see the page get more color as you make more progress. Now, I've tried all these ways of tracking progress, and it doesn't really matter which, Sadia coloring, it doesn't really matter which form you choose, as long as you make, and this is your next reminder, your success is visible for yourself. You want to make visible that you are making progress when you start doubting yourself. Now, we talked about 4 things you're probably doing wrong. We talked about 3 ways to upgrade your writing routine for your ADHD brain. And now I want to talk to you about the magic ingredient, the one thing that you really want to add to your writing routine if you want it to stick somewhat. And that is accountability. We already talked a little bit about this, about my writer's rooms, where I ask people what their goal is to say it out loud and then check back in with them. That is a form of accountability. Accountability is nothing more or less than having to admit to someone whether or not you achieved your goal. Now, a lot of the things that you have achieved in your life, you've probably achieved because of accountability, because you had a boss that you had to send something to, or you had a teacher or instructor that you had to send something to. Accountability is something that really helped you achieve the things you did. But when you're writing for yourself, this accountability factor disappears. And that's what makes it so hard for us ADHD writers to make progress on our personal writing projects, even though we are absolutely capable of delivering things that other people are waiting for. And this is the exact reason why I designed my ADHD writers coaching groups the way that I did. In these coaching groups, a lot of my one-on-one coaching clients tell me that just the fact that they are meeting with me is motivation enough for them to actually get to work and get things done. But when there are 1 or 2 weeks between writing sessions, that might mean that you don't write for 13 days and then get work done on the final day before our meeting, right? Now, I realized that I cannot be there as an accountability partner 24/7. So that's why I decided to create small groups of writers who can hold each other accountable and who can motivate each other. So these group coaching sessions are small groups of 3 to 8 writers. They can stay in touch in the chat 24/7, where they can hold each other accountable. This morning, I had a group coaching session with 3 people from Australia, and we decided that we are going to share in the group chat every time we have written, every time we've engaged with our writing projects. That way, we have cheerleaders cheering us on every time we show up for our writing project, which is a form of accountability. And that way, we can bring accountability into our personal writing projects. Now, these group coaching sessions also have weekly group calls where we have a coaching session of 1 hour where we share stories with each other, and I teach strategies and tools to overcome challenges, just like I've done with you today. And you can get feedback on your work. Now, you might ask, why would anyone in this group give feedback on your work? That is because I designed a point system to earn one-on-one video coaching. So every time you give feedback on someone else's work, you get points that you can exchange for a free one-on-one coaching session with me. That's another way to bring gamification and joy and playfulness into something as serious as finishing your writing project. Now, this is what some of my clients have said about the group. I have found the writers groups very grounding and validating. To meet with and discuss writing with others who also have ADHD has been surprisingly rich. In other words, the group has exceeded my expectations. And here's another quote. I strongly recommend these writing groups to anyone with organizational issues and or associated feelings of guilt, shame, or self-blame within or toward either themselves and or their writing practice. Now, normally this group coaching session is €200 per month. And I have, to make things easier, written it down in other currency as well. And I think I actually covered all of your currencies if the countries you shared at the beginning of the meeting were correct. Group coaching sessions take place on my Tuesday morning, I'm in Italy, or my Tuesday evenings. The mornings are perfect for those in Europe and Australia, and the evenings are perfect for those in Europe and the Americas. But because you stayed on for this webinar, I actually have a special for you. And that is that if you sign up within 48 hours for this monthly group coaching session, you will get my 10-step guide to creating a writing routine, and I will have a half-hour one-on-one session with you to help you design your own writing routine with you. Now, I'm going to put an offer up in the bottom right corner so you can start your group coaching session now if you like. And that means that you will no longer have to do it alone, because one reason why I decided to organize this webinar during ADHD Awareness Month is that I know that so many of us just feel alone. They feel like they are the only people struggling with these challenges. And this webinar was designed to tell you that you are not alone. These stories are shared by so many, and I have heard them all, but I know that you don't. But you don't have to do it alone. You can join these coaching groups, and in these coaching groups, you will get support, you will get understanding, and you get the magic ingredient, and that is accountability. Normally, group coaching is about $200 US, which is about, what did I say, 300 Canadian? Yes. Yep, 300 Canadian per month, 325 Australian per month. Good. Now, I promised you some gifts. There. And I'm going to share the time blocking worksheet with you now. I promised you some gifts if you stayed until this point in the webinar. So I'm sharing the time blocking worksheet with you now, which you can download in the bottom right corner. The deleted scenes for this webinar, I actually created another 13-minute video that answers the question, now that I've established this writing routine, how do I make it stick? How do I keep it going? Sadly, the file was so big that I couldn't share it like this with you, but I will send it to you through email after this webinar is ended. But the time blocking workbook you can download right now. Good. Thank you so much for having joined. I really enjoyed this. Keep your eye out for the free bonuses and for the webinar. And I'm hoping to talk to you soon. Good night.